GM, welcome to another Touchgrass podcast episode. Today we have Ozzy and Pharoxe. So backstory on this episode, I texted Smokey when PoL v 1.2 was being discussed on the timeline. I was like, Smokey, do you want to come on the pod? He didn't reply, and I'm going to tag Smokey here. But then I thought, who are the two most controversial people on the timeline who are actively talking about PoL, actively talking about Berachain? Critics, lovers as well, both building in the space, but active critics as well. Great to have you guys on. Ozzy Pharoxe.
Nice to be here, man.
Likewise,
Cool. All right. I think I've known both of you guys for a very long time. We've been going back and forth on the timeline. Pharoxe, I work with a lot more closely because Bakeland is a wormhole integrated project as well. I think let's probably start off with like what attracted you guys to build on Berachain in the first place. Like, I think the way to structure this episode and talk about PoL v 1.2 is actually to talk about the early days and then sort of get deeper and deeper into, okay, this happened, this is how you guys felt, and like this is how you guys feel now. So like, what was the initial value proposition to Berachain? Like, what sort of attracted you guys to the ecosystem?
You want to go first, Pharoxe?
Yeah, sure. So, quick context. We are building basically an ecosystem of risk-based social games, and I think when we first came across Berchain, it was the community that really stood out to me. So it's this vibe and like this rich lore behind Berachain, which was very aligned with our thesis at the time, which was like a bet on crypto culture itself. So yeah, that's number one. Secondly was of course Vish. I'm not sure if you guys know Vish is a part of the core team. Rachit, of course, you speak with him regularly. So he is a mentor and a brother, and he was just vibing with our initial idea of kind of this chain wars, like cult theme chain wars, which was our initial idea, and then he saw a fit for liquidity, and proceeded to get us like bear build, so to speak, and that kind of speaks for the fact that a lot of people are not attracted to Berachain for just the POL side of it. In fact, there is a lot of friction, like in terms of understanding what POL is. I think that just what I just said speaks for it, right? So yeah, I don't think I'll jump into like how POL also did attract us. Like of course, like that was like the final straw, but I think yeah, that's it for now.
That's right, man. And I think we'll get back into that next. Ozzy, what sort of got you into the Bera ecosystem?
Honestly, I was kind of dragged into this. I had two friends, shout out Notch and Alco. They were like, "Hey, like, why are you trying to build on Kanto?" And it was kind of, yeah, like like Kanto and I we like the Kanto team I met in Denver, and I was like, hey, like you guys want me to build, like I need some help here and so on. So the kind of people kind of like ditched me, and I was like, okay, where do I go now? But I like build out a big thesis on like what I want to do and how I want to do it, and that kind of caught like Hauko's attention, which led him and Notch to introduce me to Smokey and Jack. And yeah, no, I was like, okay, like this is a good community, good chain. And I didn't understand much about PL back in the days. I mean, even today I'm like scratching my head sometimes. But yeah, no, I think that was like the initial thing that kind of led me on chain. But yeah, it's like kind of like Stockholm syndrome. I don't think there is anyone that has hated on this chain more than me. And now it's like like I'm here, I'm stuck here kind of. But I also love the vibes, like I like the community. And now we kind of like filtered out the people who are like building on Berachain. Most of them moved to Hyperliquid, Mona, whatever. And now it's good vibes, man. And yeah, even though like I had a lot of hate for like the ecosystem and how things were like handled, I think like now things are like more settled and more structured, and yeah, less noisy, and yeah, that's why I'm here basically.
Is that the way to describe like the vibes in the Berachain ecosystem right now? Like a lot of the tourists have left. It's just like core builders. Smokey's a lot more interactive with teams building on Berachain, it's a lot more family driven rather than like hype driven earlier.
Oh yeah, yeah, I would say so. I don't know if Ferex is gonna agree with me here, but I feel like back then when I first initially joined, it was very like it was just a group of people talking, and the rest was like, oh yeah, hi guys, like we're tourists, we want to participate in this. And this one meme where there's like a group of like figures, and like the others are like trying to speak, and there's this one guy who's like holding up his thumb. I don't know if you guys know what I mean, but that's
Yeah,
kind of how it felt like, like it's just a bunch of people, like the core builders, and the outsiders are just there, like standing there waiting for something to happen, and nothing happened. But now it's like very, like family, I would say. Smokey actually talks to other projects besides the one that he likes. I think like now, like he knows like who's like kind of loyal to him, and who's like around, and who really really wants to build around this eco. And I think he's like very grateful, because I got to be honest, I don't want to be in his shoes. Like the past few months have been like really, really insane, and I really, really respect his patience with a lot of people. And yeah, that's like kind of how I feel. Very, very friendly community now, and very, very positive now, because like we all believe in Berachain and the technology, obviously. But yeah, he's actually going around talking to people and so on, and that's kind of what I respect and what I like to see, like in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with Ozzy on this. Like, I think back when Berchain was in that testnet phase, like it's a lot of people, like rode that wave of engagement, and it created like another level of intimidation for new builders, where like you don't just have to understand the complexity of POL and integrate, but also like kind of break into this highly insular kind of cult-like community, right? So unless you have somebody on the inside, it was practically like uh, yeah, like it was pretty difficult to kind of get your project up and running on the chain. But I think that's definitely changed, just like Ozzy mentions.
yeah,
I think the so-called extractors have been kind of purged recently, and I think that's a great thing, like for a fresh kind of clean slate for POL along with the new proposal. So yeah,
yeah. Is it fair to say that neither of you understood POL the first time you heard about it?
that would be a fair thing to say.
Yeah.
Yep.
Plus one on this.
Yeah.
And just for our listeners, if you were to give like a Eli 5 description of POL, like the first version of it, uh, could you like just shout it out? Like what is POL for our audience?
Ozzy, you want to go ahead while I think on something?
Like the first version, or like the version that we have right now? Because like
The
obviously,
first version, and then we can build on it.
I really don't know how a first version looked like. I'm not gonna lie. Because like I
Yeah, I
know
think,
what. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, no, I had this kind of, I mean, it's not the first version, so to speak, but what it does at the very core is it multiplies revenue into like whatever you want it to be, like player rewards. It could be like just user acquisition incentives. But yeah, the fact is that if you get $1 in revenue, you can multiply that like in like like whatever multiplier, like 20%, 30%. And that I think is what mainly draws builders as well onto Berachain. Because I mean it sort of like makes up for the fact that this is a tough integration right now, like a lack of tooling and so forth, and you need to get something tangible, which is that itself. So uh, and one more thing would be like it's really important who you're like who you are explaining it to, right? Like POL actually is a product meant for builders, so it doesn't really make sense sometimes to actually try and pitch the concept to a customer, like somebody like a user. Like for them, a better example would be like, okay, like here's a POL game you can play where you're getting rewards for playing the game, right? You don't need to know how that's happening. Same for like how Roots is giving like like zero like essentially zero interest on loans. So yeah, so I think those specific examples really go a long way into like having an Eli 5 sort of explanation. Otherwise it's going to be so broad, it's not really going to make sense.
Yeah, 100%. I think when I was kind of researching into the beta ecosystem, I mean, it was not an easy thing to kind of grasp at the first glance. Uh, But also, yeah, like talk to me about like why was the upgrade needed in the first place? And what were the things that you guys were like, we need to change this? And I mean, I've seen the proposal and it mentions that as industry is moving towards more fundamental driven kind of applications and revenue meta, what actually was needed that this proposal, like how this whole thing came about?
This was for me, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
anyone?
Okay.
Yeah, anyone?
Okay, sure. No, I think yeah, Farx, I'll take on this one because I
Yes,
have
please.
a
Yeah.
lot to say about this. Because I was like one of the voices. You guys remember the first article that I wrote, which was like basically about me criticizing a lot of the things that have been like going wrong on Berachain. So the upgrade was needed to go straight to your question. It was needed because there is still like to this day there is a misalignment in the ecosystem when it comes like to what should be done and what is being done right now. And when I, like obviously like I was very quiet during the Bardia days. I was like, I just focused on building. And I realized that there is a gap that you kind of can use as like a founder in order to extract a lot of money. And it wasn't a concern back then because obviously like I said this on stage at ETH Milan as well. I was like, this is all game theory, and we shouldn't treat it as something that has been established, so we have to check and see how does it really go, and how is like actually like this is also something that, for instance, like the foundation completely miscalculated. If you have proof of liquidity, that means your, like your swap volume is essentially dead. If everyone comes on and farms, like what value are you actually attracting to, like the DAXes, for instance, because there is none. You're not producing any swap volume, and this is not making like the polls that we have that are really really attractive, by the way. It's just not making it attractive for outsiders, because if you go on Ethereum and if you check out the pool APR, you would be like, oh yeah, there's actually like a lot of volume going on and I want to use that, right? That's not the case on Berachain, and that's like something I was like discussing in this article as well. I said there is no real volume on Berachain. The volume is dying, and instead you have juicy APR, but like why does it really matter if the price of Bera is like constantly going down? And that's also one more thing. The ecosystem is completely relying on the price of Bera, because one Bera equals also like one BGT, which is the token that is being, like rewarded to all those users, right? So now we have like a big problem. Price is like constantly going down, and I found this gap a while ago. That, like there's, like this gap where you just can use your powers in order to extract a lot of money out of the ecosystem. KG, I think you have a question, right? Or because you turn on your mic?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, go ahead. I was just saying, like, one thing I had in mind initially was like when I was looking at different ecosystems, one thing that attracted me to Berchain was like those APRs, like juicy, farming and stuff. But I was only looking at that part, and I think it attracted a lot of mercenary capital. Is that also like a reason where you guys are like, this is not sustainable, and all these people are just putting money here just for a couple of months? Did that become very evident after a couple of months after launch?
I would say so. Yeah, it's I would say that, like if Berachain would have launched 4 years ago, it would have been a banger. Because people would be hopping on this, like Ponzi like APRs. They would be, oh wow, I can earn 500% on this, and people are not thinking about impermanent loss and so on. So that would have been, like, kind of crazy. But now, like 4 years later, we're in 2025. The people are not as I don't want to say dumb, but like, like we all matured, like we all know how this game it has to be played now. Even though like we have phases sometimes here and there where we go extremely degen mode and we don't care about the capital that we put into projects. So yeah, that's like something that I think, yeah, it did attract a lot of people, but not a lot. I don't think that it was like the main driver here. It was initially like the hype, I would say. But yeah, back to your initial question, because like I really want to explain like the gap that I think was like that kind of led to this. So um how PL works is like either you have like kind of backdoor deals, which kind of makes the validator less attractive. Is like when you just do like backdoor deals and you're like, oh yeah, just point at this vault right here and you should be good, and like let me just give you some tokens, yada yada yada. So you're just basically doing that. But I think what most validators are like doing right now is like they are using whatever is being emitted by those protocols, right? Like if I, for instance, have the meat honey pool, which is from Roots, and I want to have a big juicy APR on this, I need to put down an incentive. For the specific pool, it's whitelisted. Currently, there's Red Bera. So if I have Red Bera, I basically put it in there, and then validators are pointing at that PoL, which is basically kind of like a gas tank. That's like kind of how Jack explained it to me. Once like the incentives have been depleted, the gas tank is empty, and then the validators move on to the next pool. So that's like the common thing, right? Like you add incentives. We've also seen like instances where like validators were just randomly pointing at pools, and I'm like, okay, this can't be healthy. But now, like, if you put down incentives and you are working hard for those incentives, right? Like, okay, like Webera, okay, we got it through RFA. Like, there are projects who are like using their own tokens, for instance, because the tokens are whitelisted, or like even stable coins, they are whitelisted. So if you put those incentives in, that means the validators are earning for their boosters the incentives that are being put down. And if that's in stables, that's good. It doesn't have to be converted. It's really good. So it's a really nice like circle that is like closing with the boosters and so on. It keeps the capital rotating in the ecosystem. But the thing that like kind of threw me off was like to find out that they're like I don't want to call them LSTs because they're not LSTs, because it's like liquid reward derivatives, I would say. So like those are like reward wrappers and derivatives, like BGT wrappers and derivatives. So if I, as a project, I throw all this money into the incentives pool, like the reward vaults, and I want to attract the validator BGT emissions, right? Like I want to have it on my pool. Then there's a specific project that is coming in and saying, oh yeah, no, like you should actually come and stake with us. Like you have this LPT that you like, the liquidity pool token that you can stake with certain providers. Either it's like natively on the hub, like the Berachain hub, or like you go to Infrared, Berachain, whatsoever. So if like I as a project put in all this effort, and the liquid reward derivatives, they're basically charging a percentage on this. So they're saying, come stake with me, but you have to, you're being charged a certain percentage in order to use this service, whatever. And obviously, it's like some of those protocols, they have either good backing or they have like a thick, like distribution. Like the BGT distribution is like, kind of thick on their end or whatever, and people are like excited to use it. Maybe they're farming it. Maybe they just like the project. So instead of going, and that's also one more thing. If you are staking on the hub, you can't move the BGT because it's soul bound. But if you go to those other protocols, you can actually move it around. So that's like kind of like where they are like extracting those fees, and those fees are obviously being used within the, like the broader ecosystem. And now we can, like go ahead and discuss, like, oh yeah, like is the capital actually even Berachain, like how is it even being utilized and so on. But to me, it kind of sounds like that, like those fees are being pocketed in order to further, like extract, it's like a tax on the chain, because this is obviously a chain mechanism, right? So you're kind of extracting value from the incentives that are being put down by any protocol. And you're like basically like a bouncer, like at a strip club or whatever. You know, like you're like, oh yeah, like you're not coming in, or like at a club, for instance, you know, like, oh yeah, you're not coming in, and then I go ahead and just, you know, give you like a $10 bill, and you're like, all right, come on, you know, like just get in, all right, it's all right. And now like you have this issue, you know, like you don't have to use those, but if you want to stay, you know, like flexible with your emissions and the rewards, then you have to use them. And if you have good backing, people will bet on you because of, you know, like farmers and so on. So that's like kind of where they are like profiting. Um, of course, like this is BGT wars, and Roots could go ahead and do the same thing. But to me, it just kind of felt extractive, especially with the fact that even Barrow was like constantly going down, because that was also another thing. You know, like you had premiums shoot up 300, 400%.
Yeah, just want to add one thing real quick before you move on to something else. Like, to add on to your point, like, yeah, so around 75% plus, I think, of BGT is held in liquid stake wrappers, or like liquid BGT wrappers. So that's like context for you guys, you know, how much of it is actually being kind of siphoned off.
Yeah.
I mean, that's maybe the wrong word, so to speak, because they are offering like some sort of service, like, but the foundation or the core team may have underestimated the adoption of these liquid wrappers, so to speak. So, which actually in some scenarios is acting as this closed loop, right? Which Ozzy's speaking of. Like, you earn like huge APRs to get liquid BGT first place, like, and then you LP that, you know, which you're auto compounding that LP. Okay, so that's another layer, and on that auto compounded LP, you're actually being able to borrow against that position and just loop that again and again, right? So you can imagine what that does in terms
Yeah.
of where the BGT is going. Yeah. So yeah, that's just something I want to add. Back to you, Ozzy.
Sure. So yeah, now like very well explained, by the way, FRX. So now like we have this issue where, you know, like their stake token, like for instance, it's like LBGT, I think, and like for instance, like stake IBGT, those are earning now like, I think at peak, how much was it, FRX? Like 300, 400%. I don't know. I don't know how much like
Yeah.
the APR was
Probably
crazy.
higher, man. Probably higher. Yeah.
Yeah, so now you have like people purchasing those IBGT tokens at a premium off the market because they obviously want to earn the APR, regardless of impermanent loss. But what it does is like you are taking a cut from those liquidity pool tokens that have been incentivized by teams who are like grinding and working hard and so on, and you just go ahead and put this in your own staking pool, for instance. And that's like kind of where I felt like, okay, like where is like at what cost are we even producing those premiums right now? And the cost was obviously extraction, because even though like, yes, I love those teams, you know, like they are good guys, they have contributed to the Berachain success, yes, but like what is it going to do in the future? And another problem, like the other problem that, you know, like Farix touched base on, was the distribution of BDT. If one entity is holding 70% of like the tokens, of the reward tokens that are also like kind of, I don't even know what the plan is for this, for like governance purposes, then that looks like it's a red flag to me, you know. And there was like one guy, I forgot his name, he was from Gauntlet, and he was like the first to spot it. He was like saying like, Ozzy, like I have a question, like after the article and so on. He was like why would I go and, you know, like use this and that? I was like explaining to him, and he was like, yeah, like I'm not gonna bridge to Berachain. This looks like very centralized, and it just looks off, and it looks like a slow bleed. And that's exactly what it was. If we are essentially looking at the charts, right? So there was literally no reason for anyone to purchase Bera. And then after the article, I came up with 1.3 because Smokey was suggesting 1.1, which was Smokey was like saying, okay, like that's like something I was pointing out. I said we need definitely like BGT emissions on the major pools, because if there's no good yield on those major pools with like the obviously like the most tokens in circulation and on like other chains, then participants won't bridge. You know, like we're looking at Rep ETH, Rep BTC, and so on, and especially like stable coins, for instance. The main stable coin on Berchain is not really Honey, because Honey is just backed by BYUSD. and how much is the upside of BYUSD, right? I mean, for instance, Roots is like literally, I think 70% is like controlled by BYUSD leverage. Yeah, people don't know that. And then USDC, like USDC circle, like the circles USD is like not even present on the chain. We have like the bridge Stargate version of it, you know. And then I was like, okay, like that's cool, but what's the APR on USDCE? And I look at it and I'm looking at 0.35%. How is that going to cut it, you know? And that was like something he was like suggesting. He was like saying, okay, let's have like a proper distribution and like a fixed distribution on the cutting board where like some of it goes to major pools, and not just somewhere, it's on the main hub, because otherwise like third party would profit off of this, and so on. And you want to, this is also something I told Smokey, like you want to participate in this revenue meta, you know, like how many, like how much money did Berachain distribute amongst users from like their protocol incentives? And that's massive. If we are looking at it, he actually corrected me on one of my posts. He was like, yeah, like this is kind of misleading, it wasn't that much, it was this and that. I was like, you know what, like it doesn't matter, because you guys are generating revenue, not for you guys specifically, but you're producing those for others using, you know, like PoL, which is amazing. So basically 1.11 came out, and 1.3 was like me saying, okay, like we need to cut, you know, like either like if BGT is growing at this pace, you know, like due to inflation and so on, and if the distribution of BGT emissions is going to stay the same, then that's going to be a centralized problem. Like it's going to be a centralization problem, because those BGT emissions at some point, they will be convertible to Bera, right? And if it goes to Bera, then you're basically messing up like the entire Bera distribution. Of course, like some of it is investors and so on, but like with inflation, the BGT stack is just gonna keep on growing and growing and growing and growing, and that will lead to inflation on Bera. So what they were like thinking was like, we don't want to have inflation on Bera. That was like the initial thought. We want to minimize the impact as much as possible, so we want to utilize BGT, and that's what they did, you know, like with like the boosting and validator shares and so on. Like that's like essentially what they did. And it's good that we have those reward derivatives where they are coming in and they're giving use case for DeFi, but it's still a slow bleed. Even though you're taking away that inflation from the main gas token, it's just a matter of time until this stuff explodes, because at one point, or like at some point, there's just going to be so much IBGC stacked up, and if those teams enable redemptions, then it's literally over, because people are going to dump it at some point, because there's going to be too much BGT due to inflation. Like the premium that we had initially was because there was not a lot in circulation. That was like initially the thing. But now there's enough in circulation, premium is coming down, and at some point it won't even make sense for you anymore to hold BGT, for instance, unless like the pools are continuing to spit out 100% APR. Then of course, like it will make sense. But now we are facing a big problem. Go ahead, sorry, Rashid.
No, so I was just trying to summarize. So the reason why POL needed to be updated is because of this inflation problem, and that was caused by these liquid reward wrappers that the foundation underestimated would have this much control over uh, BGT supply.
Yes and no. Inflation was like not the primary concern, I would say. It was more the extraction and no value of Bera, basically, or holding Bera. And that was like kind of fixed with 1.2 now, because now fixed emissions are going into a Bera specific vault, which is good, because we're talking about a lot of money here. And now like kind of the whatever you earn, for instance, on IBGT, some of it is now going straight to Bera. And I think like this is gonna offer a big change. Yeah.
Did this piss off a lot of the liquid reward wrappers on BGT? Like, I would assume they'd be like, "Game is game. This is what we came for, and we built it."
I'm pretty sure they're pissed off for sure. I think also like a lot of people hate me, and that's fine. I'll take that. But you know, like business is business, and you gotta protect the foundation layer first before we move on to actually making money. Because if we continue going down this route, then there won't be the foundation layer, and then you can just pack your bags and go and leave for Cardano or whatever.
That's pretty interesting. I think like as hyped up as POL was and how many VCs were invested into it, I'm pretty surprised that no tokenomics expert looked at POL and assumed this problem, because like if you look at like the LST LRT wave on the ETH side, that's the journey there was pretty similar as well. So that's pretty surprising. But what do you guys think of like V1.2? Let's talk a little bit about that. Like, do you think it's coming from the right place? How has it impacted both of what you guys are building? How is the community feeling? Talk to me about V1.2.
I'll let Pharoxe speak now because I've been like ranting a little bit too much.
That's all right,
All
man.
good.
I think I didn't have much to add to that question anyway. So yeah, I think on this topic, I mean, naturally, like it's a huge thing in the ecosystem because it's like modifying this engine while it's running. So I think that's also why those invested in the BGT looping and so forth, like they were the ones specifically alarmed, like after POL, like the version 1.1 proposal was dropped. So I think they had like fair notice, so to speak, because uh like Smokey and Co, they retain like the core of the 1.1 proposal, which was to tax the incentives, which go towards like the reward vaults. So yeah, I mean, it did like cut the BGT yield, but I think Infrared also like dropped this article where they showed support at least publicly that like this is something uh, they're not really like like bummed out about, because it's definitely better for the chain. And yeah, like speaking of how receptive the team has been, like I've been really happy with like the team's overall conduct on the timeline, given that there's always a bunch of people crashing out regarding price action of Bera. So like it's difficult to filter like good takes when that's like 90% of what you see on the timeline, right? So I think amidst all that noise, they've managed to do that, which reflects like also in the latest proposal, which is like how they have gone about the stakeholder analysis. It just is factual and concise, and I think it's pretty accurate and shows like all the trade-offs like at face value, right? So even if somebody's bummed out, like they can see right there that this is benefiting somebody else, or like another area of POL which is needed for the chain to survive. So yeah, I think I've always been supportive of like the core of the V1.1 proposal, which is now retained. And that's, I think, something very bullish for what we are building, like at Berchain personally, because it has a specific implication for multi-chain vaults, as well as to incentivize off-chain actions, right? Like you've probably seen like this tagline, incentivize anything on Berachain.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's maybe what, again, Puffpaw is also doing something similar. They're incentivizing vaping. But often you'll find that if you're incentivizing, for example, somebody working out, which is entirely off chain, then that's not really bringing any activity to L1, right? Which was the point of POL initially. And I think this is the main criticism I received on my article on, like multi-chain POL from some members of the core team. But I think
So
it
yeah,
was misunderstood.
you want to talk a little bit about your article, like the multi-chain POL aspect? Like, what did you actually propose? Um, how is it different from what POL is right now? And let's
Yeah.
get a little into it.
Yeah, sure thing. So I think Ozzy was also very vocal about this, and I think that's yeah. I think we might have like similar approaches. Just like yeah, I'll just dig into like a case study
Yeah.
for example, for Berchain, right? So uh, for context, like what is assumed to be multi-chain POL is that you are incentivizing LPs or like DeFi actions on other chains, right? Which was initially like not something the foundation or the core team was happy to see. Like they were like, we aren't like here to sponsor free lunch for other chains, which was not really the intent of what I had in mind. My intent was to scale the incentive capacity of this machine that is POL, right? Like it's an engine, it needs like fuel to actually grow. And we have the opportunity to tap into like that, these fuel sources essentially from other networks, right? So that way you can like have a revenue generating action on a different chain, but now you contextualize that with POL v 1.2, right? Because that is critical to like making this work, because it's taxing 33% of those incentives at face value. So, and that is being used to buy back Bera and then like drive the price up. So value accrual to Bera has been solved, which I think is the biggest piece of the puzzle, which I was actually waiting for to proceed with our second audit. So yeah, that's essentially like every dollar in incentives you bring in, 33% of that goes to better price action, right? So that's huge. That's huge, not just to scale the engine that is POL, but also like bring positive price action to the chain. So similarly for off-chain actions, otherwise an action which would not like bring in like tangible benefits to the L1. Like now, like as long as you're bribing a reward vault, like there is value being accrued to Bera and the whole system, right? So that is my take on multi-chain POL. Like it doesn't have to be seen from this extractive sort of lens, because there are ways to do it. Like we just have to expand beyond our initial scope of POL, which was I think many people still have this misconception, because Berachain was initially like sort of uh, presented as like incentivize these LPs, but it's just so much wider than that now. And I think once people see like more examples and more like breakthrough apps, that's going to be much clearer, man. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Talking about apps, like this new system in place, what kind of apps do you think it can empower? Like, like every like if you think about Berchain, you think about DeFi, you think about all these novel, some of these DeFi protocols to generate yield in creative ways. And with this new system in place, what kind of apps do you see kind of leveraging this in the best way possible? That is not yet present.
Ozzy, you want to take this?
Yeah, I think that's a tough question, because that kind of like brings me into like already coming up with new plans on how to utilize POL. But the short answer is like the options and opportunities on this chain and how you can build around POL are endless. And I think like one of the examples that we have is like, for instance, like what like kind of like Roots is doing, like bringing neo banking on chain and offering 0% interest loans. That's massive, and people are asking me, how can you even offer 0% interest rates, right? Well, the answer is, if you're building around POL, you can actually use BGT that is being accumulated in the handler and just used on a native level in order to generate yield, which is then going back into like the treasury, basically, right? So that's like one thing, right? Like I don't have to be extractive. I can just utilize POL in ways where it just makes sense. And yeah, like we like Roots in general is like one idea, but like then you also have like other projects. For instance, Yeet just came up with V2. You have PuffPo, which is very, very big, making a lot of noise right now, where they are literally paying you to stop smoking, right? Like that's amazing. Like the things that you can do is like with PL is really, really cool. And there are many more examples, of course. I think what people have to do is like they need to look up POL, read about it, learn about it, um, make sure that's like kind of their Bible, really be able to understand like the core infrastructure of Berachain, and then ideate around that, like come up with ideas on how you're gonna utilize POL in order to build your product. And I think like I said before, the ways of how you can do that is literally endless. And I'm sad that we only are like what, like 30, like we have like 30 protocols that are really regularly on the timeline, and that's about it. I wish there would be more. I wish there would be more now that the tourists are out, but like we really need builders who really build on this chain and who are really dedicated to coming up with unique solutions. And I really, really think that POL is opening up a lot of doors, not only for DeFi but also for gaming. There's, for instance, this project called Skirt Lord, which is like a racing game, and they're also like kind of utilizing POL now into their games. Um, and when it comes to gaming in general, there's also like Berachain, right? Berachain also an amazing app with good backing. It's also foundation backed, and I think like we really need um, for builders to come and use this system because it's really good. It serves like another layer to build on top of and I
Yeah,
think it's good.
for sure. Bakeland as well on the gaming side. I think apart from gaming and DeFi, I think Berachain has like a pretty big upside on building like a DeFi chain. KG, I remember. Do you remember us talking to Sal about this? Like, POL can just be used to boost deepen incentives, and you can basically reward the network multiple folds. So I think that's also interesting. I know we're over time. The last question I do want to ask both of you guys, just to close this out, what is there anything that's missing out of POL V 1.2 that you were hoping for but is not there?
Yeah, I think from my end, I'm taking this by the way, Ozzy, like nothing much to add really, because the main thing I was looking for is like taxing of incentives, and secondly, like value accrual to bearer. Like, so both of those things addressed, I think. Yeah, I think it also tangentially like addresses the extraction on the BGT front. Like now that it's much less profitable to do so, I think we'll see less of that happen. So yeah, like nothing to add from my end there. Ozzy?
Okay.
I think I've had a lot of conversations on the timeline in private, whether it's with like a foundation core team or um, fellow builders. I think this is what we need now, and we will just sit back and enjoy it for now, and reevaluate when the time is right. Because I'm pretty sure there are like new things that like, will come up in the future. Because yeah, even though you should never like how do you say it? Never fix a running system, or like there's like a German saying that I like kind of stick to, but it's not running, so we got to fix it until it's running, and then we're not going to touch it anymore. So the system needs to run. Right now it's running, but it's running not the way it's intended to run. So we'll see how it goes, man. I'm pretty stoked.
Yeah. Also, lastly, I want to add that like I'm glad myself that it's a very simple proposal, so to speak, like very digestible for people. And I put out a tweet regarding this, but this has resulted like in a much clearer kind of discussion on the timeline around V 1.2. And secondly, like the clearer the comms are, less convoluted, like the more bullish it translates to being, right? So it's the message is simple, right? Like the stance is that we want more value towards Bera, and yeah, essentially that is what people in the end care about. Like it's going to drive price up, and it also addresses like this intimidate kind of this intimidation towards learning POL. Like when people see like V 1.2, somebody's curious, they see like this whole fucking like insanely complex proposal on V 1.2, they're like, shit, this is not my jam. Like they're gonna bail instantly. So yeah, I think I'm really happy with the way this is going.
Yeah. All right, guys. This has been awesome. We'll definitely have you guys on back again in like a couple of months and talk about how V 1.2 has impacted on the Berchain ecosystem. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on, guys. Super appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
very
having
much.
us, man.